doctor Otto. Y pasamos con nuestra segunda conferencista, la doctora Magdalena Patricio. Ya les voy a hacer su presentación y ella nos va a hablar sobre la utilización de evidencia como método en la mejora de la educación médica. La doctora Magdalena Patricio, ella es PhD en Medical Education, pues ella es nuestra representante desde AMI. Acá en la diapositiva podemos ver su gran recorrido histórico en todas las, digamos, asociaciones y contribuciones que ha tenido a la educación médica. Entonces, doctora Magdalena, le doy la bienvenida, por favor. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarnos el día de hoy en esta jornada.
Muchas gracias. Lo prazer es todo mío. Pregunto si puedo seguir hablando en inglés o si prefieren el portuñol. No sé qué prefieren.
Bueno, pregunta a los participantes. Entonces, cómo se sientan más cómodos realmente y también cómo se sienta más cómodo usted, doctora Magdalena.
Yo creo que hablo mejor inglés que lo portuñol, pero para lo que quieren.
Acá nos están escribiendo por el chat que en inglés que si se siente más cómoda y que pues si tenemos dudas las preguntamos al final, doctora. Entonces
Okay.
empecemos en inglés.
Ok, entonces voy a abrir para poder partilhar. Un momento, share screen. Bueno, ¿me pueden decir si están viendo bien?
Sí se
Bueno,
ve bien, doctora. Gracias.
está bien. Bueno, first of all, I would like to start by thanking the organizing and congratulating the organizers for this initiative so important in these complex times of medical education. For me, I want also to say that it was a pleasure and an immense honor to contribute, and I will do my best because the topic was not easy. The use of evidence as a method to improve medical education trends and process. I prepared this presentation based in the following points: the need and difficulty of finding evidence in medical education. Is evidence possible in medical education? Then the topic I was given, trends and process in the use of medical evidence in medical education, and how can BIMI contribute to the use of evidence in medical education, and final message and conclusions. Part 1, the need and difficulty of finding evidence in medical education. I'm sharing with you the cover of British Medical Journal in 2000 or 2002, I believe. And the question was, what's a good doctor and how do we make one? What I was surprised regarding this question is because it remains the same in 2024, with medical schools looking forward to find what works better, to teach and to train their students. Tremendous developments are taking place. Medical education is really facing one of its most challenging and exciting times. Why? Because the complexity of these so challenging developments have implications in healthcare. If I share with you some of them, I'm sure you would agree that globalization, explosion of medical knowledge, explosion of new technology, patient new requisites, different students arriving at medical faculties, social accountability of medical education, of medical schools that are under scrutiny, the non-alignment of health and educational priorities, no stakeholders collaboration, much more competition. All these, and I could be going on and on, are extremely complex. And how do we know? How can teachers in school be sure that they are taking the good choices to approach all of these big challenges? What could we expect now when the context is so complex? And my questions to you, I wish I was there, is can the teachers and schools be up to date in medicine and in medical education? But I have another question for you. How many articles did you read last week? 1, 2, 5, none? I'm asking because I don't know if you have an idea of how many articles you need to read per day to stay up to date in medicine. Do you know that the problem 3 decades ago was already stated by David Sackett? He found that to keep up to date in internal medicine, it was necessary to read 17 articles per day, each day of the year. But moreover, he also said that half of what is taught at the universities is wrong. But the worst is that the teachers do not know which half is wrong. This is dramatic. And it's by this quotation that I choose to mention David Sackett. So if this was just for internal medicine 3 decades ago, could you believe what would be the numbers if we are looking at our times? What was the solution then for a busy teacher? In medicine, the Cochrane collaboration is producing systematic reviews to help doctors to take informed decisions. And in medical education, it's now recognized that a more scientific approach is needed. This is an enormous process. And why in medical education? Because there is no one best method that could be applied to all similar situations. And although we continue to witness debates on which is the best method for teaching and assessing, but there is not these things. There is a need for evidence-based education, and stakeholders are looking forward to available evidence to inform their decisions. And finally, also, because there is a need for accountability. Why? Because schools are now under scrutiny and they need evidence to justify their curricula, their decisions, their methods. Moving to part 2, is evidence possible in education? The question now is if it is possible or not. And the answer also can be BIMI. And BIMI is producing secondary research for medical and health professional education. BIMI is an international group collaborating and committed to the development of evidence-informed education in the medical and health professions. So, BIMI is collecting evidence on what works, for whom, when, and in what circumstances. But the second question is, if we can trust BIMI evidence, is this possible? The question is regards the fact that we can have in education or not something similar to what Cochrane is for medicine? To answer these questions, at our Faculty of Medicine, University of Lisbon, we decided to examine the basis of educational evidence compared to clinical evidence, and also to understand the different nature of science between these two approaches. I will share now the results of this study that were presented at the BIM-AMI conference in Lyon in 2012. The research question was, which are the major differences between Cochrane review and BIMI systematic review? And the methodology, we compare BIMI reviews in medical education and Cochrane reviews in clinical medicine. Comparisons were based in reviews that were undertaken by the Center of Studies of Evidence-Based Medicine at our faculty. But before giving you the results, I need to clarify or to share with you, I'm sure you are aware, the concept of causality in medicine and education, which must be defined. A factor is a cause of an event if its operation increases the frequencies of that event. We all know this. And this is true for clinical medicine and medical education. But there is a but in education and all social sciences where we need to pay attention to other variables. In medical education, we also need to consider the following. We know, and it's common to medicine, that there is a cause, the independent variable, the result, the dependent variable, and other factors that we call confounding variables. And they are external factors correlating, but not being the cause. For example, the fact that the bell at the fire station rings when there is a fire alert does not allow us to say that the ringing of the bell is the cause of the fire. This is a spurious or false association, and we have a lot of these situations in medical education. Ask a relevant question, now approaching the common steps. Ask a relevant question, search selection of primary students, critical coding and evaluation of primary studies, synthesis of evidence, and implications for practice are the common steps in evidence with Cochrane or in education with BIM. But what about the major difference? The research questions are more complex in BIMI reviews because of the confounding variables, and we will know how. In BIMI, there are not standard guidelines for all studies. In Cochrane, a statement, a very clear statement, can be made at the end, when in BIMI, it must be just a general recommendation that usually cannot be generalized to all situations. The conclusion was that both approaches are similar in terms of methodology. The difference between the two approaches is perhaps more a matter of degree than the existence of fundamental difference. But in both approaches, and this is extremely important, in both approaches, the decision-making should be supported by a hierarchy of evidence, because evidence alone is never sufficient for sound practice. Sometimes we can get results that are statistically significant, but we need some concepts behind that told us that you can accept this. Most important conclusion was that the synthesis in Cochrane gives the point of estimate. And in BIMI, as I already said, shows just what works for whom, in which circumstances. So, if the conclusions from a Cochrane review can be easily followed, of course, the doctors need to examine the individuality, if the patient applies to what was said as guidelines and so on. But in BIM is much more complex, because if I have evidence, then a practical class, in addition to a video, for instance, or to a theoretical class, compared to another type of method, produce more impact in students when they are learning something, you know that this is not so obvious and always the same. Why? Because the impact depends on the teacher. Different teachers can have different impacts, and we will see this later. While in medicine, if I'm giving an aspirin, it's always an aspirin with a certain composition. We publish a paper based on this study that I will send to you. What we need really to have always in mind is the specificity of medical education. If in clinical medicine a benefit is found in an experimental study to test the efficacy of aspirin in a specific diseases, there is no doubt, as I was saying a minute ago, that the intervention of an aspirin with a predefined size and milligrams and so on is the same for all patients. But if positive results are found in medical education in an experimental study to identify the impact of a specific method by a specific teacher, the transferability of results to practice is more difficult. Why? Because it is impossible to dissociate the effects of the confounding variables, namely the teacher charisma, the teacher enthusiasm, the capacity for motivating students, for calling their attention to the important parts. It's very difficult to be dissociated from the intervention itself. This is always the effect of confounding variables. And this is why in medical education, instead of evidence-based medical education, we say best evidence medical education. That's it. I add the word best because this is the best evidence we have, but cannot be, as I already said, generalized to all situations. Part 3, trends and process in the use of evidence. The use of evidence in medical education has been evolved over the years, but I would not say quickly. It's just now that it started to be really evolving. Trends and process play a role in the use of evidence to improve medical education. And let's see how it works. Integrating BIM into curriculum. Sorry, it's not moving. The use of educational research, technology enhancing learning, assessment and feedback, faculty development, interprofessional development, continuous quality improvement, lifelong learning and continuous medical education, globalization and cultural competencies, plus, is here a problem? I cannot advance. Why it's not going? My goodness. And the patient-centered education, and also what is called the personalized education, all these developments that you are aware that are explosion on these areas, namely on the research on all these areas, are contributing to this, the need to people to be aware to the need of evidence-based education. More, if I'm looking now for the processes, if we think on a systematic review, the evidence synthesis, the need for needs assessment, the curriculum development, the educational interventions, the implementing strategies, the evaluation and assessment of the implemented strategies, the interventions, and the curriculum development, the continuous quality improvement, and the dissemination and translation of the finding that we have in the systematic review and all sorts of evidence play an enormous impact in the evidence to start to be really the basis of the decisions in medical education. What can BIMI, Best Evidence Medical Education, do in terms of evidence in medical education? BIMI collaboration was proposed already in 1999. This is why some minutes ago I was telling you that in my perspective, evidence in medical education is progressing, but very slowly. Harden, at that time, proposed the following: that we need to move from opinion-based teaching to evidence-based teaching. Which were the BIMI contributions? Evidence synthesis and systematic reviews dissemination. We will see in a moment that we have more than 80 systematic reviews published, BIMI guides and recommendations. We also have initiatives to train and develop authors, reviewers, users, and so on. Institution and international collaborations towards quality. And also BIMI is intervening, and in some countries in a very strong way, to advocacy and policy development, and also in capacity building with grants, with mentoring, with offering resources, and so on. We already, I said, published more than 80 systematic reviews. They were published, and they can help medical education. And I'm giving you some examples how BIMI has answers to support teachers. For example, if I have a question like this one, should I use simulation in my teaching? And what 10 measures can I take to more effective? This was a question so important during the COVID time. For the answer, if we look at BIMI Guide 4, already in 2005, you can see the features of effectiveness. They are all here. It was a systematic review with the leader was Barry Eisenberg. He is the Dean for Education at University of Miami, and also the director of one of the most, probably the most important simulation center, the David Gordon Simulation Centers. So, another example, what can be done to deliver an effective faculty development program? What are the results of staff development? For the answers, we can look at BIMI 8, 19, and 40. And what they tell us, it's here, results, satisfaction, changes in attitude, but unfortunately, few changes in organizational practice and student learning. And the future effectiveness, we all know, but it's good to have this based on evidence, experiential learning, feedback, peer and colleague relationships, well-designed intervention, multiple methods, etc. Another one, should we use a multiple mini interview or a traditional method for selecting students for undergraduate health programs? For the answers, we can look at Guide 37. And we have also the conclusions. No need to go in detail. I will be sending these papers to you if you want to have an approach. Moreover, I'm back to BIMI Guide 4, the first one that I mentioned from Barry Eisenberg. And this why? Because it is from 2005, as I already said, but it is still one of the most cited and downloaded papers in medical teacher. So don't think that if we have evidence in something that have been proven 10, 20 years ago, we need to examine, because as I said, nothing is generalizable per se. But you will see that usually the things that have evidence 1, 2, 3 decades ago have now the same evidence. What we need is to look what is new and need more evidence. Now, I mentioned this first guide 3 times, but let me just make a reference to some very recent guides. 5 papers were published in 18 months during about the COVID, when it was the pandemic. We start working at the end of May 2020. The first was published in August 2020, and the theme core was almost the same for those papers. And these 5 papers were published in 18 months. The starting point when we were invited to participate were to conduct a rapid review to see and to know the advances in medical education in responses to the pandemic. We all wanted at that time, do you remember that all face-to-face classes were suspended and there was a chaos in the universities? All the teaching was changed into webinars, online teaching, and we were worrying, we were asking what was going on in the world. So we start by accepting all stages of education, all types of studies, and all forms of development when something was implemented. It's not just those who talk about ideas or theories. The first one was conducted by Maurice Gordon. I was there also. Developments in medical education in response to the COVID pandemic, a rapid BIMI systematic review. These developments in medical education, these are the authors. It was published, and then we have more 5. Sorry, I have some. The BIMI Guide 65 also. This one, BIMI Guide is 69. I will send them. BIMI Guide 17. And then we have recently, I think it was last month, this current month, BIMI Guide 80, already about the COVID situation. These are just some examples, because more questions and answers are available at BIMI Guides. Oh, sorry. BIMI is really the leader in medical education secondary research. Now let's move to the final message. What is crucial in the use of evidence in medical education? This is what we need to know from this presentation. This is the most important part. At the beginning, in a systematic review, it's important to clearly identify a relevant educational problem under research. At the end of the systematic review, it's crucial to clearly identify the educational implications to practice and to research. So, when you look by a BIMI systematic review or any other systematic review for looking for evidence, it's always a question of coherence from the initial problem to translation into the practice. What is not acceptable in systematic reviews or in process to identify evidence is to have systematic reviews concluding just by saying, oh, we need more evidence in the following areas. Taka, 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 taka. This is not enough. We need to start by saying, in terms of the initial research question, this, and this was found. At the end, we need to identify what is working and what is not working. And it is so important to close doors with things that I thought it was probably a good idea, very effective, but it was not. So close doors is so important as to open the windows with new effective ideas. The implications are crucial in a systematic review. Together with the quality and rigor of the methodology, of course, they determine the quality of the systematic review, the global quality of the systematic review. The implications need to be always done in terms of the practice, the policy, and the research. I like this picture. Look what medical education is saying to healthcare. Medical education can no longer stay globally static with difficulty to encompass the tremendous changes in healthcare practice. To be effective, medical education must be based on evidence. A culture of evidence is needed. And medical education can systematically use evidence to inform and improve educational practice, and ultimately enhancing the quality of medical education and preparing future healthcare professions to meet the evolving needs of patients and society. So what we need to have in mind is that evidence in medical education is not an end in itself. It needs to train and to improve the quality of medical education, and at the end, to improve healthcare. And this is why we need to have always clear implications from evidence. A change is needed. From day one of undergraduate training, we must treat our students, we teachers, we must treat our students in a different way. Let me share what I got when I was invited to the HEMSA, European Medical Students Association 15th General Assembly in 2015 in Berlin. I went to their websites before the conference and I saw this, today's medical students. And then below, doctors of the future. And I understood. We must train the future doctors based on evidence, but above all, making them aware of its importance. They are no more just students. They need to feel they are future doctors. And we need to give them to feel this responsibility. They are not the same as students that are looking for mathematics or law or other areas. They are future doctors. And to finalize, I will share with you what one of our major poets said. There is a time when it is necessary to abandon the used clothes, which already have the shape of our body, and to forget our paths, which take us always to the same places. This is the time to cross the river. And if we don't dare to do it, we will have stayed forever beneath ourselves. This is the time to cross the bridge, to fill the gap between from medical education based in opinion to medical education based in evidence. But this should be done based in two pillars: a culture of evidence and a culture of BIMI. Medical education based in evidence counts on you to to disseminate evidence in your institutions, to collaborate as reviewer, and to integrate a systematic review, or to undertake your systematic review. I will be sending support material just after this presentation, and I will be sending bibliography as well as all the papers I mentioned in my presentation, plus some bibliography I took from the ChatGPT. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Madalena, for this wonderful presentation. Right now, we have 2 questions in the audience. Please, Dr. Peralta, you can ask your question.
Good morning to everybody. Thanks, Dr. Patricio, for your presentation. I think that I have very much to think about BIMI and evidence medicine after this presentation. I have a question. How much the evidence provided by BIMI, for example, can be correlated with the medical education in countries like the Central American and Caribbean? Thank you very much.
Sorry, if BIMI can be correlated with medical education?
In this area, the Caribbean and Central American, because it's different. The different area have different situation in general.
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
And it's why I mentioned the example of the aspirin, because all regions, but even in the same university, if something that proves to be very effective with one teacher, maybe if another teacher take the presentation layout with the same slides and so on, it can have no impact. There are many confounding variables, as I said. So we never can take the evidence from one place and adapt without looking at it, seeing how is the nature of the students, what was put in as the methodology, and then estimate if it could or not be working. If yes, you need to implement. But it's not like a systematic review in Cochrane, as I said, So it's not only with South America, it's with all parts of the globe, and even in our faculty, we need to analyze and decide if it is going to be okay to try or not.
Thank you so much, Dr. Madalena. Thank you, Dr. Peralta, for your question. Do we have any additional questions in the audience? Please raise your hand if you want to ask something. Okay, we have an additional question, Dr. Madalena. How to face the challenges of implementing new evidence in medical education in traditional education that resists innovation? For example, implementing simulation in the curricula requires a lot of resources, training the faculty and monetary resources. But we know the advantage and the benefits of simulation. How to negotiate these inclusions with directives? Any recommendations for that?
I think there are 2 things maybe that you can do. First of all, to look clear at the sound basis of education, and if possible, do some work at your faculty to see Look, this is not only outside in Portugal, Paris, Thailand, or so on. No, this is working. We tried this and this, and we have these results. And then ask the dean to see what university can gain. Because if you have this, and if you try to start thinking of making innovation and publishing, and so on, you can be or have a paper cited in one of the best journals. And this, the dean would like to know that your faculty appears with a pilot program in simulation that it's working. Then you also have the support of the students that always love the classes that are not just 50 minutes or more theoretical. So the students will support. They tell this at home. And at home, mothers and fathers that usually are also doctors start also to talk about this innovation at the faculty. So I'm not saying that you can see at the end of the day or in the month or so on a benefit in money, but there are all the results, and above all, if the students learn better, I hope your dean, this is what you would like to have, because the motivation for a better faculty must be one of the main objectives of a dean. I don't know what to tell you more, but if you need support,
No,
call
it's
me.
perfectly fine.
I will.
Thank you so much, Dr. Magdalena. Wonderful messages. Okay, so thank you so much for interventions. Now we're going to continue with the schedule for today. Thank you so much.
Okay, I will send you today all the bibliography, okay?
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you to all of you. And sorry, because I was just a bee. I was picked just before starting, so it's not easy. Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye, Dr. Magdalena. Gracias a todos. Entonces, para dar continuidad,